Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Welcome again, everyone, and let's go around. My name is Jim Stewart.
Mark.
Oh, Chris.
I'm Jay.
I'm Leonard.
My name is Gary.
I'm Ting Hao.
I'm Michael.
My name is Tony.
I'm Tom.
Baruch.
I'm Garth.
I'm George.
I'm Roy.
I'm Chian.
Dan.
Peter.
My name is Sully.
Hello.
David.
Morgan.
Jerry.
John.
My name is Elaine.
John.
Peter.
Rick. And Gary.
Ed.
Anthony.
My name is Clint.
My name is Jerry.
Richard.
My name is John Wesley.
My name is Rob.
My name is David.
I'm Tom Bruein.
I'm Doug.
Ruby. Jim. Morrison.
Richard Azzolini.
Peter.
Antoine.
Steve.
Jerry.
Jack.
Yeshanabuk.
Albert.
Freddie.
Victor.
Gary.
John.
Lee. Jim.
Well, good. Welcome, everyone. Again, how many here are here for the first time? Welcome. Our speaker today is Barry Friedman, a Sangha member. He is a longtime student of Buddhism and martial arts and Hindu astrology and many other caps. He's a psychotherapist. He teaches religion at Holy Names College. And his talk is about bringing the dark into the light. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Welcome.
Good morning. So I found out a couple of weeks ago that I could either talk about my life and what brought me to the Gay Buddhist Fellowship, or I could talk about some aspect of Buddhist Dharma. And I had already decided I was going to talk about both, so I hope I haven't broken any rules here. So I wanted to add one other piece. A good friend of mine, Jim Fishman, had pointed out to me that there's an article in the Bay Times, I think of this last week, by Tom Wolfe, who's a gay analyst, and he's talking about spirituality and the shadow. So I haven't had a chance to look at that yet, but you might be interested in checking it out. So first I thought I would read a short poem to you that really captures my sense of what it means to be on a path, a psychological path, a spiritual path, the whole thing, and where it brings us. This is a poem by Derek Walcott, who is a Jamaican poet, and it's called Love After Love. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, "Sit here, eat." You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit. Feast on your life. So, I'll start by sharing a little bit of my life and what brought me here. I've been practicing Tibetan Buddhism for about 20 years. And I've also been out as a gay man for much longer than that. I was in a long-term relationship with a man for 10 to 20 years, as according to how you reckon those things.
Sometimes it felt like 20.
Yes. But I've never, in any significant way, been a part of the gay community. I always had the idea that somehow I was too strange or weird to be accepted in the gay community, and that I would feel very uncomfortable. And so I decided to face my fears, and the Gay Buddhist Fellowship seemed like the most benign place for me to
We're really scary.
It seemed like a really good place for me to be and to let myself be seen here. And it also seemed to me that if I was ever going to have a partner again, that this would be a good place to find one. So I came here. And right after the first sitting that I was a part of, we were sitting out there, and this man came over to me, and we started talking, and he asked me a little bit about myself, and in the course of conversation, I said to him, I mentioned that, I've never actually been to a bathhouse, and I've never particularly been promiscuous, and he kind of looked at me half incredulously and half contemptuously, and he said, "Are you sure you're gay?" But I decided to come back. And I'm really glad I did, because I have met some wonderful people here. Really beautiful souls. And this also is a really fine place to meditate, to sit and meditate. So I'm glad I'm here. But this issue of not feeling that there's any place for me has something that just didn't start with my being gay and my relationship or non-relationship to the gay community. I have felt this way since I was a small child. I'm the only child of Holocaust refugees. Most of my family was killed in the Holocaust. And so there was a great shadow hanging over my mother, my father, and myself throughout my growing up. I knew my family was different, even from most other Jewish families that we knew. But in addition to that, my mother and father had their own unresolved personal demons that they lived with and had to hold, as well as I having to live with it and holding it with them. So my childhood was, from the time I was about 3, was very painful and very lonely. And I often wondered what I was doing here. So from that sort of foundation, I yearned for an emotional and spiritual liberation from my loneliness and from the pain that I had been holding. And sometimes I actually longed for a physical transcendence from this plane. So around 11, 12, I started playing with my own meditation techniques. What I used to do, I remember at that time, right as I went to bed, I would imagine that whatever God was everywhere, and that in any point in space or time, that if I turned my head, so to speak, I would find the presence of God. And so I started practicing this, and I kept practicing it for a few months until one night, I suddenly felt something really intense, and it scared the shit out of me. So I stopped meddling with that sort of thing for a while. So then that kind of went into quiescence, and as I got older and I got into college, and for the next 15 years or so, I studied and practiced a number of different major spiritual traditions. Judaism, Christianity, but particularly Buddhism and Hinduism. And I continued studying and practicing in the history of religions. But whatever I practiced, however fervently, it didn't take away my emotional pain, nor the associated behaviors that come with unresolved emotional issues. So I finally realized that if I was going to free myself of this old stuff, that the only way to get away from it was to go right into it. So I have that intention, but like everyone, we all have various defensive structures that are geared to keeping us from feeling deeply, and especially feeling our deep emotional pain. And I'm no exception. So I worked it the best I could. I brought forward a huge amount of narcissistic inflation, escape fantasies, drugs and alcohol, and nothing worked. Nothing worked. So I finally brought myself into psychotherapy to deal with this shadowy stuff. My unresolved fear, shame, rage about many things. Shame about being gay for a time. And I brought all of this stuff in to my therapist, my first therapist, and he had the devil of a time with me. I dumped everything onto him. But fortunately, he was a stout fellow. And he helped me, he guided me to learn to tolerate my feelings and to accept them, to contain them, and to embrace them as deeply as possible. Everything that I found in the unconscious, that I was able to find in the unconscious, in which we call the shadow, everything that is in the unconscious, whether the ego thinks of it as good or bad, is the shadow. It's the ego's interpretation of whether it's good or bad. But whatever it was, I tried to look into it as deeply as possible. It was, as I did this, I realized it was a profound alchemical work of mining the inner world and refining and integrating what I found there. I learned many things in the process. For example, I learned that facing my intense fears brought forward, as I dealt with them, a tremendous ally within myself. That those fears were an incredible opportunity to bring in an internal ally into my life and my process. And I learned also that embracing one's unresolved rage and anger and claiming it and integrating it brings with it a tremendous sense of personal empowerment. So I've been working thus for a long time. So I went into therapy to deal with my pain and loneliness, and I still do, of course, have my share of pain. But I stayed in the therapy because it brought me into relationship with the deepest parts of my emotional and spiritual life. And it's a gift that I keep on giving to myself, because not only do I want to continue to grow personally, but I have a commitment to continuing to grow as a psychotherapist. And as many of you probably know, a therapist can only take you as far as they've gone themselves. I had a dream back in the 90s where my Hindu teacher, Amachi, came to me and said, "You are a teacher in the bathrooms and alleyways of the world." I said, what a great description for a psychotherapist. So, let me transition here now into Buddhism. So Buddhism, like psychotherapy, tells us to begin from where we are. There's no choice, as far as I'm concerned, about that. So where we are actually is this utterly complex and multi-layered set of feelings, experiences, thoughts, conditions, defenses, and all of these affect our lives in so many different ways. A great teacher once said to me that one of the great tasks of enlightenment is making the unconscious conscious. So I don't see how we can avoid that. There are many people who try to use spiritual practice as a way to get away from their actual human experience and from their unresolved issues. Spiritual practice is, of course, so fundamentally important and useful, but like anything else, it can be used as a defense to get away from exploring the deeper recesses of our inner world. There's the great Sufi poet from the 14th century, Hafiz, has a wonderful little poem about this. It's called 10,000 Idiots. It is always a danger to aspirants on the path when they begin to believe and act as if the 10,000 idiots who so long ruled and lived inside have all packed their bags and skipped town or died. So my experience has been that deep spirituality requires deep feelingfulness. When spirituality bypasses feeling, it loses an important ground of its being, and we lose an important dimension of our intrinsic nature. Something else, which is that spiritual practice for anyone does generate energy. It generates power. But the ego is always interested in co-opting that energy and that power in so many different ways, in such clever ways. So it's very important for us to be as aware as we can of what's going on inside of us. And every spiritual tradition that I know of stresses self-awareness. So I've been particularly drawn to Tibetan Buddhism because in its own unique way it makes room for the transformation of the elements of the psyche. It doesn't shy away from strong or difficult feelings. I see Buddhism as saying, experience the inner world deeply and with compassionate awareness. Feel deeply and engage with your feelings, whether they're pleasant or painful, with mindfulness. Both Tibetan Buddhism and Jungian psychotherapy, which is part of my own psychotherapy practice, they're very alchemical in nature. They harness the archetypal energies that dwell within our psyches, the 100 peaceful and wrathful deities that we find in Tibetan Buddhism are parts of ourselves, intrinsic parts of our own psychospiritual nature. We experience them as feelings or feeling states that are asking to be experienced and liberated. By doing so, by actively exploring our inner world and by holding and reflecting on the psychic material that we find there, we make the unconscious conscious. To me, this inner work is really about, it feels like burning karma in the light of consciousness, liberating psychic constraints, and so gradually getting closer and closer to the true uncontrived nature of who we are. So, I wanted to share with you a teaching that came to my martial arts instructor, who was also my partner for those 10 or 20 years, who is a wonderful scholar of Judaism, and he and I have had many wonderful talks about the Torah and so forth. And he came upon a passage in the book of Numbers, the fourth book in the Torah. And the passage is Vehakriv Hamakriv Korbano. And literally it means the sacrificer approaches with the sacrifice. But what's so interesting about those three words, sacrificer, approaching, the sacrifice, is that they all have the same etymological root, which is to approach. And so what that meant for me as I thought about that is that, the very act of approaching something that is holy or sacred can be an external altar, but approaching the sacred is sacrifice itself. That as we approach the inner altar of the self or of Buddha nature, just the approach is an essential and intrinsic part of sacrifice, of offering ourselves. And so as we do so, as we approach that inner altar of the self, the ego becomes more transparent. We become more transparent. And the light of the true self, or of the Buddha nature, is able to shine forth more clearly just by approaching oneself. And I think we're all here to illuminate our own path, our own life, and also to shine our lights for others, so that the work we do on ourselves is for ourselves, but it's also for everyone else. So I thought I would, still have a few minutes, so I thought I would offer up a meditation that came to me in my own process years ago. And then I'll open it up for questions. there's a small sort of preliminary piece I'll share with you, which is what I discovered for myself, that just bringing one's awareness to one's heart center, very gently, one's inner awareness to one's heart center, letting it rest there. In the Dzogchen tradition, they talk about at least one particular school and one teacher, the son of Urgyen Tulku Rinpoche, suggested that one simply sit back, but it's not so much a physical sitting back as a energetic sitting back into oneself. And so what I found that by resting one's awareness, by sitting back, so to speak, into one's heart, that over weeks, months, years, that this place becomes activated viscerally, emotionally, spiritually. And that there's nothing else that one has to do in that particular practice except just to bring one's awareness back again and again to here. So I thought I would share that with you. I share it with some of my psychotherapy clients who are interested in spirituality. Many of them are therapists themselves and are interested in this. So I found it very useful. I wanted to share that with you. But having said that, let's close our eyes, and I'll just briefly take you into this this little visualization. So take a few deep breaths and just let your thoughts and anything that you're holding, just let it go through the exhale. And now bring your awareness to your heart center. And imagine that there is a fire burning there, like a campfire. It's just burning. Its burning is completely spontaneous, uncontrived. We can think of it or imagine it to be the essence of our soul energy, or our life energy, or our psycho-spiritual energy. And just see it burning in the center of your heart. And notice that just like physical fire, it needs oxygen, it needs fuel to burn, to live. So we as human beings, as physical, psychological, and spiritual beings, also need our own version of oxygen and love and care. And we have so many wants and desires and needs. And the fire, for its intrinsic well-being and its continuation, just automatically by its nature pulls in what it needs to itself. And it does so without shame, without any hesitation or uncertainty or doubt. Its nature is to pull toward itself what it needs. So, imagine this fire pulling towards itself whatever it needs. If the fire in the heart needs love and support and compassion, imagine that those things flowing into the fire's pulling them in. So just let that flow continue. No shame, very spontaneous, intrinsic to the nature of our fire. It keeps pulling what we need. And we can see on the periphery of the fire all sorts of other things that are arising and saying, oh, but there's this and there's that, and me, I want this, I want that. All of those things, let the fire pull them in too. Let all of those things that are arising in awareness be pulled into the fire without any shame. All of our fears, our anger, everything. Bring it all onto the path. Bring it all, let it all be pulled into the fire. And, of course, what happens with fire is that when you feed it, it grows brighter and stronger. The light, the illumination grows. So just imagine this ongoing flow from the universe being pulled into your heart center by the fire, by the light of your soul, the flame of your being. And as a result, the light just very spontaneously and naturally gets stronger and stronger. And your lungs, your breathing becomes like a bellows, pulling everything in. And the exhale, the fire grows, the light grows. So now, just take a few deep breaths and gradually open your eyes. So before we open it up to questions, I just wanted to read one more poem to you. This is my other favorite poem. And though it comes from the Odes of Solomon, which is about 2,000 years old. But if you substitute God for the self or for Buddha nature, and you look at this, at the garden imagery, not as heaven or paradise, but as a pure land, this place, then this, I think, will resonate even more. So this is from the Odes of Solomon. My heart was split, and a flower appeared, and grace sprang up, and it bore fruit for my God. You split me, tore my heart open, filled me with love. You poured your spirit into me. I knew you as I know myself. Speaking waters touched me from your fountain, the source of life. I swallowed them, and was drunk with the water that never dies. And my drunkenness was insight, intimacy with your spirit. And you have made all things new. You have showed me all things shining. I have become like paradise, a garden whose fruit is joy, and you are the sun upon me. My eyes are radiant with your spirit, my nostrils fill with your fragrance. My ears delight in your music, and my face is covered with your dew. Blessed are the men and women who are planted on your earth, in your garden, who grow as your trees and flowers grow, who transformed their darkness into light. Their roots plunge into darkness, their faces turn toward the light. All those who love you are beautiful. They overflow with your presence, so that they can do nothing but good. There is infinite space in your garden. All men, all women are welcome here. All they need do is enter. So, questions, comments? Yes.
Is there a teacher who writes books in this similar mode and/or has retreats or a retreat center that it's possible to visit?
In which mode?
In the mode of non-dual beauty that absorbs everything and is everything and yet is nothing.
Any
Simple question. I don't have too many lives to get to.
any great practitioner or teacher in any of the major spiritual traditions will offer you exactly that, I think.
Well,
Yes. Yes. I think Amachi has this level of Amachi. She's a Hindu teacher who comes to San Ramon a couple times a year. I think there are many Buddhist teachers around who, I've studied with this one and that one and picked something up from all of them. So if you just look, if you check out various Buddhist centers, really, I think that we resonate with certain people, we resonate with certain schools, and so trying out different things is really useful. The things that I've been practicing and picking up over these years are really bits and pieces from different teachings and empowerments that I've gotten, and not just in Tibetan Buddhism. And then I've brought all of this onto my path. I brought this together and made it my own. And I think that ultimately that's something that each of us has to do. We have to make our own, whatever it is that we learn and study and practice, we have to make it our own practice. I'm sorry, I can't be more specific. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I can't be more specific.
Yes.
Coming from a Christian tradition, some of my own connotations around sacrifice that have always just been seem sort of primitive to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering how you are using the word sacrifice in this bringing forward.
Right. Well, Jung said that every victory for the self, for the soul, for the self, is a defeat for the ego. But I don't hold a dualistic view about self and ego. So I think of it more as we came into this life with our karma, with our prima materia, the stuff that we came in here to work with. And that sacrifice is not about going, oh, no, I can't stand that. But going, okay, this is what I've got, and I'm going to look into it. And I'm going to smell it, I'm going to taste it, I'm going to swallow it and process it, and see what it has for me, what all of this shadow and pain and apparent darkness has for me. I'm not going to let my ego's reaction to it get in the way. And so for me, sacrifice is diving into my own darkness and into my fears and very strong feelings and of anger and so forth, shame, and holding them, tolerating them. It burns. It really burns sometimes. Or it feels very cold. But all of that, to me, is approaching the altar of the self. All of that's the sacrifice. It's not about strict dualities between the sacred and the profane, and an attempt to deny or dissociate from the things that maybe certain institutionalized religions say, this is not good for you, avoid it. There are sometimes one hears in Buddhism itself, oh, you shouldn't be angry. Don't cultivate that feeling. Don't go there. And I don't agree with that. I think that we're all heir to these feelings. They're part of our psychospiritual process. And that, yes, of course, venting and discharging unprocessed anger is worse than useless. It's destructive. But there is energy in it that if we face our fears about it and work with it and refine it in a sort of psycho-spiritual alchemy, that's the sacrifice. It's not easy work. And then we find the alchemical gold that's in it. One of the major thoughts of alchemy is that the pearl of great price, or the gold that we're really looking for on a metaphorical level, is only found in the excrement, in the filth, however we want to call it, of our unconscious inner world. So that's the sacrifice.
So sacrifice implies to me that you're giving up something for the sake of something else. So I guess I'm just not quite getting
well, I hear you.
Using it in a different sense.
I think I'm using it in a different sense. To me, the sacrifice is not just, at moments it is about giving something up. I think that's very true. But I think what it means to me is something broader. Yes. Yeah.
It's interesting that you chose to talk about bringing the darkness into the light on a wholesome fair weekend. How does that
it's a synchronicity.
play into this theme of making the unconscious conscious?
I'm sorry, please. What's the question again?
How do you think the wholesome fair, that S&M culture, I guess, or subculture, plays into making the unconscious conscious?
I like these kind of questions. The way that I might think about it, just off the top of my head, is that people are exploring the limits and edges of their psyches. And I always think there is usefulness in that. Now, how people enact those images and fantasies, that's each one's purview, within each one's purview. My orientation is ahimsa, non-injury. So I hold to that. But, we are all free to explore our psyches as we will. and my hope is that one does so non-injuriously. Yes.
Okay. First, I might be asking the wrong question, but you'll tell me. In this fusion spirituality that you've created for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned Judaism, which you come from,
Mm-hmm.
Hinduism, and Buddhism. Is there any conflict? I mean, you did a few minutes ago talk about that you feel that you need to make it your own, but these are very strong traditions with rules and regulations and lots of stuff. So I wonder if you could say anything about that.
Sure. I was very gratified to hear a few years ago a Sangha, a sister of mine, told me that the Oracle of Buddhism some years ago had said, in this Kali Yuga, that this last of the 4 ages that Eastern civilization posits, that we're deep into it, that it's useful to have more than one practice. So that kind of gave me some succor. But more generally, I have it's the toolbox approach. I look for the essential truths and useful practices from each tradition, and I bring them onto my path and integrate them into how I practice my life. I don't feel, at least for myself, that following the dogmas or the strict beliefs of a particular school or tradition, it doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me. I want to make it my own.
And you still feel like you belong? You talked about...
Absolutely. Absolutely. I told you at the beginning that, it's been hard for me to feel that I belong in the world, and more specifically, in the gay community. But as I've been working my process, I feel so much more comfortable in the world, in life, than I ever imagined I possibly could be. Yes?
You mentioned about making the darkness your ally,
Uh-huh.
and finding the pearl in the excrement.
Yes.
I have a feeling of that experience, but I'd like you to maybe elaborate on that. Is it that what you're finding in the excrement is what you're meant to come here and learn, and therefore you actually have to burn that to transform it into light?
Yes. Yes, I do. In Sufism, in the mystical dimension of Islam, in Sufism, there's a belief that all of us are born with some kind of difficulty or flaw that's like a thorn in the side, and that we live with it throughout our lives. But that it's that very thorn that helps us to grow and mature as psycho-spiritual beings. And that it's useless to try to make it go away. So, I'm making a virtue of necessity. I'm working it as hard as I can. Yes?
I'll link to what the sacrifice. What about what in your study or in your interpretation or definition of acceptance?
Acceptance. I'm sorry, I didn't understand. What is my understanding of acceptance?
That's right. So the link to what just
in regard to sacrifice. I hope this will sound like a direct answer. perfection is an illusion in samsara, in the phenomenal world. Perfection is an illusion. So whatever we're processing and practicing, it doesn't end. It goes on. Whatever our practice is, we have it for the whole of our lifetime. The Amachi herself and others, Dalai Lama, have said, doesn't matter who you are, if you're in samsara, there's always suffering and pain, and there's always something that can be worked on to grow in the quality of self-awareness and enlightenment. And so, if we look at this process, again, not as just letting go, but as, walk in the path, one step at a time. And, the only thing to do is, chop wood and carry water. Got to keep walking the path and walking the path. So there's no perfection. But part of walking that path is accepting one's imperfections and accepting who one is. Working on oneself and accepting who one is are not mutually exclusive. One doesn't preclude the other. They are part of the whole. We need to accept ourselves for who we are and hopefully learn to love ourselves in all of what we call our imperfection. But even that word is perfection, imperfection. They're just words. They're just words. Yeah. Yes.
I'm very curious about working on the dark side, work with yourself and with your clients.
Yes.
Where pharmacology fits in.
Pharmacology I think is very useful. I think it's very useful. When someone is struggling with what feels like intolerable anxiety, depression, or other permutations of our mood issues, I think medication, the right medication, used prudently and well, is a godsend for many people. And, being a masochist is, aside from any political issues about it, being a psychological masochist or a spiritual masochist is not something I believe in. And if medication can restabilize the pool of neurotransmitters in our brain and help us to stay grounded and to stay more connected to what we feel is our deeper self, then I am all for it. And it's not for everyone, and in my practice I sometimes refer people for med evals, and it's just a very individual thing. Yes. Yes.
This question goes back to the idea of sacrifice.
Yes.
And the idea that sometimes you can find pearl in excrements.
Yes.
So I guess part of the sacrifice is that nobody wants to walk on excrements or live among excrements. And part of that is letting go of that fear and with the hope that you will find a pearl where the filth is.
Absolutely.
So as you try to integrate different spiritual tradition,
yes,
and the different essence of different teachings into your own path.
Yes.
So what is the process that you go through to make sure that the things you don't like about each tradition that you are not able to integrate seamlessly into your own path is not the very thing that you need to go,
That's really great. That's a great question. I need a drink for that. Well, part of one habit of self-inquiry that I've cultivated for a long time is that whatever whatever I'm drawn to, but also whatever I most don't want to look at, I go there. In psychological terms, you could almost call it a counterphobic transference. It's like, oh, God, okay. And so I go there, and I encourage my clients to do the very same thing. I say, okay, so you're just, inner sort of resting where you are. Notice whatever is drawing you, but also notice what you don't want to go to, what you want to avoid, what you're frightened of. Go there. Go there. So it's a habit of thought. It's a habit of self-inquiry, which hopefully, at least for the most part, counters the risk of losing something that's really necessary.
I really appreciate that answer because I feel like, for me, I'm reluctant to surrender my own free will and my own path for this, for some teacher or whatever, no matter what credentials they have.
Yes.
Right? But at the same time, I was struggling, like, what if I never transcend myself because of that fear? What if that fear of surrendering to another?
Yes.
What if that overcoming that distrust is the very thing that I need to go so that I can actually... So it's always a tension. So I really appreciate that.
Always a tension. Yeah. Always a dialectic, always a paradox. Yeah. Thank you. That's a great question.
I think that's such a great question that we should end there.
Okay.
Jerry, thank you for a very
Thank you.
productive,
Thank you so much.
Really, this could go on, but I know there are other distractions about town. Announcements, Bill, our host.
Hi, I'm Bill. I'm your host today. There's cake and fruit out here. Please help yourself. There's also tea, and if you use one of the cups, please wash it out before you leave. For those of you who are fairly new to this Sangha, if you'd like to be listed in our directory document, or if you'd like to receive our newsletter, there's a sign-up sheet right next to the Dharma bowl, so just fill your information out there. If you're looking to do something for lunch today, usually a group informally gets together. They meet at the front door at about 12:30, and feel free to join in. And lastly, I'll be coming around with the Dana Bowl. Suggested contribution is $5 to $8, and just please remember that it's your contributions that keep this Sangha going.
Jack.
Hi, I'm Jack. As Bill mentioned, we put out a newsletter every other month, and today we're mailing it. It is available on the website, gatebuddhist.org. We send out over 300 hard copies, about half to regular people, and this month 162 to prisoners. On the last Sunday of the odd number month, we gather with volunteers, maybe 8 or 10, out here so we can fold, staple, label, stamp, and stuff in the envelopes. So a few people can, and I'd like to see hands for commitment. Thank you.
Right. Some of you may have noticed in the online news, or rather the email that goes out, that I have a workshop coming up at Esalen. So I brought some catalogs in case anyone wants to look at it. And the theme of the workshop is Shift Your Mood, and it's coming up in 6 weeks in November. And it's based on the book that I just read, just came out this summer, which enables people to release the emotional tension that they're experiencing and in a mindful way around their own body awareness, shift to the source of their own love and inner wisdom. So if any of you are interested in that, I'll be around for a while and happy to talk about it as well. And plus I brought a bunch of catalogs that people could take with them. I also have a workshop coming, that one's for a general audience, and I have another workshop coming up at Esalen in June specifically for gay guys, called Gay Men Thriving. So I'll put these out there. Thanks.
Clint.
Well, next week is the Castro Street Fair. It's somewhat gentler fair than what's going on today. encourage people to stop by and say hi.
Are you all staffed?
I believe so. I wouldn't mind having some backups in case. Unfortunately, I can only stay for the social period like for about 4 or 5 minutes. But if you want to be like a backup staff, or, which would be useful, just pigeonhole me or cornerhole me, whatever. and give your name and contact information, and
Okay, Marvin.
Yeah, a long-time Sangha member, Larry Wish, is experiencing some severe health problems and was admitted to Davies Medical Center this week. If you could send your thoughts and prayers in his direction, it would be much appreciated by him, his friends, and his caregivers.
Can he have visitors?
Yes.
John.
The San Francisco Bach Choir, of which I am a member, is having their first concert in October 16th, 17th. We're doing some of Handel's Chandos anthems. They are wonderful, glorious, happy music. So if you have an interest in that, Google San Francisco Bach Choir, or I can give you that information.
So just a quick update on Don Levine. For those of you who don't know or are not on the Yahoo list, and Don usually sits where Roy is right now, Whitebeard. He spoke to us July 14th. Don's heart, he's got a heart condition that has worsened considerably. He's been in for several 7+ hour operations. He doesn't anticipate being able to leave the hospital, so he probably won't be returning to us. His heart capacity is at about 30%, and the only option is a heart transplant, which for various reasons he's opted not to pursue. So at some point his condition, he's at the VA hospital, at some point his condition will deteriorate and he won't be resuscitated. Or he may elect to turn off his defibrillator that's on constantly to keep him alive, and he will leave us. So if anybody, if you want to visit him, he's at the VA hospital. I put details on that on the Yahoo group, so you can check that or corner me. And yeah, and so if also if anybody wants to write him a note or cards or anything like that, there's numerous people here who have been visiting him and will continue to. We could deliver those because he doesn't have access to email.
Yeah, the visits tired him. So if you go, keep it sweet and short.
Call first.
Call first, maybe, yeah. And he's in an absolute luminous state. It's quite remarkable to see someone with such acceptance that he could go at any minute, which is basically the case.
Yeah, and I just want to add, I mean, for most of us who visited him, we're sort of curious about, well, what about this? What about that? And I think what's remarkable is the acceptance that he's come to of, the impermanence of all things. And so his Buddhist practice, he recently came to us only a couple years ago, came at just the right time.
How many here were at the retreat last weekend? I would say that's a very healthy show of enthusiasm for really Michael Murphy. Thank you so much. You want to talk about it?
I don't think I'm very objective, but it just was an incredibly sweet retreat. It just felt so, it had such a lovely flow about it. And so I hope people will consider, who have never been to a retreat, will consider joining us next year.
It really was remarkable in all aspects. So it's a good question. There's been a confusion. The directory for which there's a sign-up is a hard copy item that has people's addresses and what they do, as much information as they want. That's for you to take home, and that's for people who want to present that information. The sign-up sheet gets you an invitation from George, who is our Yahoo listserv moderator, to join the Yahoo list, from which there are many important announcements. And if you have signed up to get the newsletter, not by mail, you have to go to the website and download it yourself. It doesn't get projected out to you. One person had never gotten the newsletter, and they thought it would be, what is it, pushed? Is that the technology? And we don't push the newsletter. We just let you know that it's there, and you have to go get it yourself. And Michael Langton is our newsletter editor, par excellence, many years, doing a great job. Thank you very much. And Tony Pasqua transcribed this issues article, A Labor of Love. Thank you. Anybody? Anything else? Okay, let's get in the circle. Gary, would you like to give us a message?
Oh, all right. May our hearts be open. May the causes of happiness, compassion, and self-awareness continue to arise in our lives for our benefit and for the benefit of all beings.
I have one more announcement. Here. Michael Powell from college. He was in an old classic book. He's the publisher of the Shambhala Sun magazine, which is the most beautiful and wonderful, I believe, of all Buddhist magazines. He was in Boulder with Trungpa, and he's a long warrior on the path. It's so great to have you. He's one of the righteous straight men in the world.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy personally to be here, but more than that, I mentioned to you that next weekend we're here hopefully to support the activity of groups just like you. You've been doing wonderful work for a long time. We're doing something called an urban retreat. Probably pick this coming weekend. It's the worst month. So many things going on. And I just mentioned, if with all the other things to do, there are a couple of members of your Sangha who would find it helpful. We'd like to make a couple of tickets available. People who would like to join in on any part of it. Starting Friday, Sylvia Burstein from Spirit Rock, Norman Fisher from Zen Center, and Sopni Rinpoche from the Tibetan Vajrayana tradition, all teaching together on wisdom for difficult times, what the Buddhists teach. So I'll just leave it up to you. Let's just, you just figure out.
I can put a thing on the list.
Yeah, put a thing and just let me know, and we'll be happy to greet and host anybody from the community who would like to drop in and just experiencing that. And somebody here who said they wanted a place to kind of experience different things. That's what we're trying to do, create another gateway. So, thank you very much for letting me do it.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.